are live on YouTube at our usual time, Tuesday around 4 p.m. And things are heating up in the mock draft category. Peter Schrager, the highly regarded guru for ESPN, formerly of NFL Network, came out with a pretty respected mock draft. He does only two, and he bases it on a lot of interviews with NFL insiders. And he's saying the Steelers will use pick 21 on TJ Parker, the edge rusher from Clemson. Moreover, they're doing this, according to Schrager, while Ty Simpson is on the board, and they obviously have QB needs, and they're leaving two receivers on the board in favor of this edge rusher, Boston and Concepcion. So, Nick, there is, how much weight do you give the these Schrager mocks, because he does have some accuracy, track record, and what do you think of this idea of a TJ Parker pick?
I mean, I think Peter Schrager is connected, but the idea of the Steelers taking an edge rusher is lunacy. Let's not mince words here. The Pittsburgh Steelers are not taking an edge rusher in the first round of the 2026 NFL draft. Like, that's all that needs to be said. And we're not talking about a guy that reduces down to the interior either. That's not really what TJ Parker is. He's a pure edge. And it doesn't matter really what your evaluation of TJ Parker as a player is. The Steelers have 4 good edge rushers, and they're not trading one of them. And so that all-encompassing, if you want to get younger on the D-line, they're going to get younger on the interior. I still have real questions about the first-round interior defensive lineman that could be available to the Pittsburgh Steelers. But this idea that they're going to take an edge rusher, he's not, Peter Schrager's not the only one to mock them an edge rusher over the last week. Mike Tannenbaum also mocked them Akeem Mesidor, who was a guy that actually could reduce inside. He played defensive tackle starting at West Virginia, switched out to edge at Miami. But we're talking about a guy in TJ Parker who is truly just an edge. And so any talk of the Steelers drafting an edge rusher in round 1 is absolutely wild. It makes no sense at all. It is the one true position, John, that I will sit here and tell you they are not drafting an edge rusher in the first round. It's not happening. So very odd pick. Sometimes when these mocks come out, you get these pairings in some of these mocks where it's an atypical team with an atypical player just because that insider has buzz that player is going to go in the first round. And maybe he just couldn't find the right fit for Parker, so he threw him with the Steelers. But absolutely makes zero sense whatsoever. The Steelers are not taking an edge rusher in the first round.
No, hey, that's why we have you here, Nick, because when something like that comes out from a guy like Schrager, who does have, some credibility, and he does spend some time, doing the research and, getting with, trying to get the inside poop, so to speak. So update everybody on the podcast of your current thinking of what you're hearing for the Steelers at 21.
Yeah, well, I think we're kind of back to where we thought we would be all the way back in January when we talked about this. And it certainly seems like wide receiver and guard feel like the likeliest two options. Listen, wide receiver to me is still likely. I think one thing that is new is we're getting to a point where it might be likelier than we ever thought that a Jordan Tyson could fall to them at 21. This was something that had been previously thought about as crazy talk, but Jordan Tyson has not ran this cycle. He's continued to deal with these hamstring injuries. The durability concerns continue to pop up. If he's there at 21, I don't know how you pass him up, right? He's kind of like the Troy Fautanu pick or the Derek Harmon pick where a guy just falls right into your lap at a big position of need and makes so much sense. So that's one thing to think about. And there's just another litany of wide receivers they could go with. I think Tate and Lemon are probably going to be out of their reach, but you throw Tyson in there now along with Concepcion, Boston, and Cooper, and you have 4 really good options. Guard, we obviously talked about before. We've talked about Venga Ioane multiple times, John, on this podcast. He fits a mold there. And then maybe you have this third option, I think, that's emerged, John, where you could have a tackle guard, a guy that maybe plays tackle but could play guard year one, someone like Utah's Spencer Fano, someone like Alabama's Caden Proctor, someone in that mold that maybe could fit into that. I know people would hate tackle in round 1, but I guess it has to be on the differential board. where you're at. And then I guess you have the sleeper picks, which could be like inside linebacker, corner, something like that. But I think we're pretty firmly here on two positions, wide receiver and offensive guard. And I think those are your two spots to really pay attention to in round one.
Yeah, another outlier, speaking of some of these mocks, and they can get really crazy with trades. And one of those, I guess, an ESPN, Bill Barnwell, has the Steelers doing a trade with the Dolphins to go up to 11 to target Ohio State safety Caleb Downs. Where would something like that come from? I mean, a guy just kind of dreaming up a trade like that to go up 10 spots and get a safety.
That's, to me, I mean, listen, a 2027 second to go get him. I'm sorry, trading away from any of your 2027 draft capital when you don't have a quarterback, to me, is crazy. I love the player of Caleb Downs. I think he is truly a high-level, awesome talent. But I do have questions about, is this guy at a safety spot, right? We're not talking about receiver. We're not talking about tackle. We're not talking about edge rush. We're not talking about quarterback. We're talking about a safety. Or is the value positionally worth that? If you don't have to go up a 2027 second, fine. But I'm not giving up my 2027 second. I'm not giving up my 2027 third. This is not the draft to be giving away 2027 draft picks. This is not as good of a class as 2027. People are going to be wanting 2027 picks in this class. They're going to want to trade out at 26, but how many buyers are there going to be for those picks that you would sell to get the 2027 picks? So that, to me, it's wish casting, just to say the least. I don't think that that's a realistic scenario unless you can move the glutton of 2026 picks for that. I think that would be the only way that makes sense. So love Caleb Downs, the player, but trading a 2027 second is absolutely wild to me.
Right. Now, I agree with you that the 2027 draft is looking more and more appealing. And I'll tell you, I mean, for the quarterbacks in this 2026 draft, I mean, you have Schreger basically saying there's only one going in the first round. So it just looks like a really, really bad quarterback draft, shaping up for this 2026 draft. And we talk about Drew Aller coming out of Penn State and, some of the big game deficiencies he's had, but, all the measurables are there. And we say, well, he'll be the third or the fourth quarterback coming off the board. He really didn't suffer that much, considering the disaster that 2025 was. But when you say he's the third or fourth QB in a draft where only one QB goes in the first round, I don't know how much of a resume enhancer that is, because some drafts you get 5 quarterbacks going in the first round. I mean, what's your view of this quarterback class as we get closer to draft day?
Yeah, it's not a good class, as you mentioned. Is it better than last year's? Probably. But it's not a good one, right? Mendoza's probably better than any of the guys last year. I like him better, personally speaking, than Cam Ward. But this is not 2024 where you had 6 of them go in the first round, right? And not all those guys are working out anyways. It's hard to hit on the quarterback position. It's even harder when you just have a lack of options. There are not many options, man. I totally could see this happening where there's a scenario where Mendoza goes 1, Simpson goes somewhere in the 20s, 30s, and then the next one doesn't go to 110. I could see that happening where it's just the bottom falls out from under this. We've seen this happen before. Remember in 2022 when the Steelers took Kenny Pickett, it took over 50 selections for the next quarterback to get picked in the third round. Could we see a third round run on quarterback? Sure. That could be the spot where Aller and Cole Payton and Garrett Nussmeier and some of those guys fall. But I also think there is a daunting lack of sizzle on a lot of these guys. I think Payton and Aller have fun physical tools, but other issues. Nussmeier's is small, has a really good arm, has good processing, but has some injury questions. Beck's arm is dead. There's a lot of questions about a lot of these players. And so it's just not a good class. And the Steelers, are going to take a dart throw at some point in this group. I think that they will take someone, but are they a decidedly better prospect than Will Howard is like a legit question. I know I give people on here, that talk about Will Howard and everything. I give them a little bit of pushback a lot, but like I will not push back on that. A lot of these players that are coming out this year are better prospects than Will Howard. So are not better prospects than Will Howard. Sorry. So like, yeah, it's a poor quarterback class, man. It is not a great group to work with. And so I think it's kind of what you're working with. Next year, you hope it's better. The Steelers obviously amounted this war chest of picks, thinking they would be in a position to trade up for a quarterback. But the Jets are 3-14, are as quarterback needy as anybody, and they don't have a quarterback to pick. So that's the state of the class right now.
Nick, I think you might have just coined a new, social media phrase: daunting lack of sizzle, DLS. I mean, that could be one of those, SMH, shaking my head, daunting lack of sizzle. I love it. Anyway, we got somebody in the chat talking about, okay, maybe they won't trade up. Maybe they trade down, going down and letting Arizona or Las Vegas come up for Monroe Freeling at 21. What do you think of that? Trading out of the first round in this 2026 draft.
I mean, here's the thing. I think about Monroe Freeling, and I think he's going to go a lot earlier than people think. I don't think he's going to be there 21. I mean, we're talking about a guy that raw tools wise is just awesome. Like really great, elite physical tools. And to me, I'm honestly thinking he could go 6 to the Browns, guys. Like that's how early Monroe Freeling could go. This tackle class to me is going to have a lot more run on it than people think. I don't think you're going to see Freeling on the board. I don't think Proctor's going to get there. I don't think you're going to see Malinoa there. Could Fano fall short? Lomu, I guess. Blake Miller, and then you have Ehanashore. So you have like those 4 guys, but 2 of those guys could also go before him. I think there's going to be more tackles off the board than people think. It's a pretty shallow offensive tackle class. So I'm going to guess if you need one, you're going to take one earlier than maybe you think. So there's always a run on those positions. That's something I think about. So I don't know if, a trade back scenario would come probably if there was a blue chip prospect. I just have also the idea of why would the Steelers not take the blue chip prospect? They seem to be in a perfect spot to do that. Unless it's like Kenyon Sadiq, who is like, this great tight end out of Oregon, and the Steelers, not taking tight end in the round 1. I think, that's fine. You could trade back out of that. But, if you get a guy like Freeling falling or, even a guy like Fano, that's at 21, I'd almost be more tempted to sit there and take him rather than trade back. That's just my feeling, though. Unless you can get like just an absolute haul of 27 picks. If you can get a really nice haul of 27 picks, then that's a different story. But I think that's going to be a very rare scenario. And from people I've talked to in the organization, the Steelers want to do that. Like they want to get 27 picks, but I think even they have the reality of who's really giving them.
Right. Freeling falling. I think that was a Tom Petty tune. No, free falling.
Freeling falling.
There was a note in the chat that my mic was a little low. I upped it. Do I sound better, you guys? Let me know in the chat.
Mine's also probably really hot, so there's probably queuing there. But Megan, who's our usual producer, not here, so I'm running this kind of laissez-faire, guys. We're going to see how this goes.
And Nick got a big promotion and a huge raise. He's now the producer of the podcast, so all complaints go to Nick.
There you go.
Yes. Of course, we love this speculation. We love the lead up to the draft. Speaking of trading back, the other thing I'm thinking of, and before I go to my next point, this draft, there's going to be 700,000 people there in Pittsburgh, lots of Yinzers, lots of drinking going on. If the Steelers trade back, especially out of that first round, don't you think there would be a vote? I don't see any way the Steelers actually trade out of the first round, in front of the home crowd. Do you?
I don't think they will. I'd be stunned if they traded out of the first round. Here's the thing about the first round to me. The Steelers have too many needs to fully trade out of it. And two, if you trade back too far, guys, all the wide receivers are going to be gone. The guards might be gone. Like, you're going to be in a spot that you just don't want to be in. And to me, I mean, I don't know if the home crowd thing has anything to even do with it. The Steelers aren't a team that trade back that's going to trade back from a player they really love. That's been communicated to me many times over the years, and that's an Omar Khan thing. So it's not a Mike McCarthy thing, and that's not changing, with Mike McCarthy here as head coach. So I 100% believe that they're going to stick either 21 or mini trade back. I don't think they're going to trade back significantly. So yeah, I'd be surprised if that happened. That's what I will say.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's you got to consider the venue and the audience. Now we just talked about at edge we're set and we're not trading our guys, but you want to test the market. What trade value is there out there for a Herbig or a Highsmith?
I mean, you could get a significant pick for them, but you're not trading them. Like, they're not getting traded. It's not happening. I think you can get a first-round pick for a Herbig. Like, we're talking about a 24-year-old edge rusher entering the prime of his years without a deal. I mean, you're going to have to pay him, but I think you can get a first-round pick for him. He's that type of player, but they're not trading him. So you can get significant picks for him, but this is also not the class to trade someone for. And I'm not trading someone, for a 2026 second. I don't value a 2026 second as much as I value a normal second-round pick. Because I cannot say this enough. From everyone I talked to around the league, this class is not viewed well. Like, the whole class, and I'm not talking about a specific position group. I'm talking about every bit of this class large. People think this class is one of the worst classes in recent memory. I've heard a lot of comparisons to 2013 when people have pointed that out. 2013, when you look back on it, the first round of that draft is one of the worst first rounds ever. Now, when you go down the board, there's a lot of good players in that class. Like, there are some all-pros and pro bowlers that were selected in the mid-rounds. There certainly are going to be players like that in this class as well. But I also look at where's the top talent? Where's the depth of the talent? Feels like a lot of the positions that even I consider good in this class are more so shallow, right? Or if they're depth, they're like, oh, I can get a good tight end 3 on day 3. Well, that's cool, but I can get a tight end 3 on day 3 of any draft. And so this is not a good class. It sucks for the Steelers to have 12 picks in this group. Like, this is just not the type of draft you want to have a surplus of picks. The Steelers do have that. I don't know how they're going to try and shake around that. Are they going to make 12 selections? I'd be pretty surprised. I actually think the likelier scenario, we talk about trade ups, trade downs. The likelier scenario to me is the Steelers trade up in the second round. I think that could be something they do. And the two guys I would really think about, because I think, let's say right now they go wide receiver round 1, because that's kind of my thinking, to be quite honest with you, is wide receiver round 1. You come up in round 2 to get a Chase Besantis and Emmanuel Pregnon, who are the next 2 top guards on the list. That, to me, is the type of move you make. Or you go up and get a guy like D'Angelo Pons or Chris Johnson, a high-level corner that can also project in the slot but can play outside, right? Those types of players, to me, are the types of players you could see the Steelers, the guys that are in between them in the first and second round, they could maybe move up for and deposit some of these picks off to the side, because I don't think they need to make 12 picks. I would be calculatedly aggressive in this class. And so to me, going up and getting one of those guys in the second round, if you can get up into the 40s, there's a few other guys I would look at, a Jacob Rodriguez, if you wanted a guy inside linebacker that could be the successor to Patrick Queen as your green dot. That would make some sense. There's a bunch of different guys. If you get one of those top receivers falling, right, if you get an Omar Cooper falling into the second round, maybe you go up and get him. There's just those types of names that, if you get the other scenario I think of, one of those tackles that I named, the Blake Miller, Caleb Lomu, Maxi Hanachor, if that group starts to slide a little bit into the middle of the second, maybe you go up and get someone like that. I think being aggressive and trading up in the second round makes a lot of sense, actually. I'd stick at 21 and then try to get up in the second round and get someone that maybe you wouldn't otherwise be able to get. Because at 53, it's a very odd spot to be picking, honestly, John. When I do mocks and stuff like that and I try to figure it out, there's not an obvious name. Like I remember 2 years ago, Zach Frazier, if he was there, was the obvious name, right? They're doing kind of the same thing at guard now. They have a better option in Hoffman and Henderson than they did in Nate Herbig at that time at center. But the left guard is still a gaping hole. They need another guy there. So if you could tell me I can go up and get Emmanuel Pregnon, I'll do it because I think he's a stud, right? If Basant is a stud, those are the types of guys that I would think about going up and getting.
Hey, I love that thinking, Nick. And to me, 12 picks in a regular draft, that's considered, deep, is still too many. I think in a draft like you described, where there is the lack of blue chippers at the top and even the lack of depth throughout, you got to target your guys and go get them with those picks. You have the ammo, use it, deploy it to get the guys you want that can move the needle. We need guys that can move the needle. Now, the one thing that I always think about, especially with the Steelers, when there's all this pre-draft speculation, is that we're overthinking it. That if you look back, past drafts, there wasn't a lot of doubt of who the Steelers were going to take, especially in the first round going in. I mean, they telegraphed a lot of those picks, in the recent past. I mean, are we overthinking it? And it's just a no-brainer that it's going to be one of the wide receivers that fall to 21. I mean, that is like the no-brainer.
So here's the thing. If you look at it, it's just harder to kind of 100% put on the dot how this regime's going to act. Because while you have the data from the front office, you also can point to and say, man, are they going to act differently? Like, what does McCarthy look at and what does he value more? I think we kind of know that, though, John, right? We know that based on what he said last week, all the physical traits. And you also have years and years of drafts Mike McCarthy was involved in to at least look at and say this is kind of what he likes. And so I think that there's ways to profile it. I think that there are some obvious names. So, for example, okay, the Steelers brought in Darrell Jackson Jr. today for one of their top 30 visits. Pre-draft-wise, defensive tackle from Florida State. We're talking about a guy 6'5", 315 with 34 and 3/4 inch arms. Physical specimen. That is the type of guy they're going to like. That's the carryover from Mike Tomlin. They are going to love pedigree. They're going to love physical traits. They're going to love that because I think like Mike Tomlin in some ways, Mike McCarthy is an old school ball coach. They were both old school ball coaches that think a little bit old school. So the physical measurements, the physical traits matter a lot to Pittsburgh. 2, they think they can coach these guys up. Give them the innate talent because you can coach them up and turn them into something. Every now and then you see that fail with the Steelers. You see that fail with a guy like DeMarvin Leal, for example. That did not work out. Other times you see it work out beautifully. I think of a guy like Keanu Benton, who has just continuously taken steps forward. Darnell Washington has continually taken steps forward. The Steelers really like the unique. And so that is one thing to look at too. I do think, wide receiver and guard in round 1 is fairly obvious, and I think that's probably the direction they're going to end up going. Could they throw a curveball at you? Sure. But also, you look at some of what Mike McCarthy's teams did in the draft in Dallas. So, let's say this. He's going to have more influence here in Dallas in Pittsburgh than he did in Dallas because Jerry Jones runs the ship there, right? But, you look at some of the picks they made, and it's not like crazy. Like, they stopped CeeDee Lamb's fall in 2020, his first year. Unbelievable pick, obviously, but also just a guy that is, obviously the best player available. Fine. You kind of understand that. And then you kind of go down to 2021, and you get Micah Parsons. Again, unbelievable player. BPA. You stop his fall. They also needed an edge rusher. It so happens to help. Tyler Smith, offensive tackle. They needed to refurbish the offensive line. The next year, they needed a defensive tackle badly. They take Mozzie Smith. The year after that, they badly need another offensive tackle. So they take Tyler Guyton. All of these guys fit into a certain mold, and they all fit into the mold also of just great physical traits. And so you look at that and you get some really talented players over the years. I mean, I look at the first draft that he had, and you think about CeeDee Lamb, Trayvon Diggs, Tyler Biotish in that draft. The draft after, you obviously have Parsons, but then in the third round you get Osa Odigizua, like Nashawn Wright in the third round. That's been a hit for them. You know, he's not with the Cowboys anymore, but he's been a good player. So there's just a lot of different things you look at with the Steelers. And I think a lot of it's going to carry over. And so there's some obvious targets I can point to at every position that you would not be shocked at all by, just based off these parameters. It's not that hard to pick them out.
Yeah, and what you're describing is targeting and drafting for need. I remember there used to be a mantra in a lot of these draft rooms: best player available or best athlete available. I really think it's smarter to target guys that you need and that fit your system. So if McCarthy is going to bring that acumen there, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the type of thing he's going to do. And so he's talked about how at receiver he likes size more. That's no surprise to anybody. You look at some of the corners they brought in for pre-draft visits: size, length, physical traits matter. That's the key here. It's not just quarterbacks. You know, we talked about all last week: hand size, arm length, big arm, like all these things. Guys, it's all around. It's all around this. Look at his drafts in Dallas, and you see outlier players just with physical traits. Like Nashawn Wright, for example, that I pointed out, he had a really good year with the Bears last year. We're talking about a guy that's like 6'4" at corner. That is something. And the Steelers obviously really like Joey Porter Jr. because of how long he was, right? That was something of that. And so I think you just look at physical traits and you say, it just fits. Like, I can point out a number of players in the first round. Like, they're probably going to like Venga Ioane just because he is such a clean-cut prospect from a physical perspective, and just the tape backs it up too, right? At wide receiver, I'm sure they're going to really like Denzel Boston. Now, they brought in Boston for a 30 visit today, but also you look at like the guys that he has kind of drafted over the years, and you see bigger bodied receivers. You see, I mean, literally, I looked this up today, and I thought this was funny. The best physical comparison to Denzel Boston is Jordy Nelson. I thought that was wild. And I have questions about the Denzel Boston fit, but like, it's a wholly on brand type of guy. And then the other thing that I always look for in a Mike McCarthy prospect that I have kind of learned from people in Dallas and Green Bay that I've talked to is the players have to have a superpower. And by that is, what do they do really well? So I look at a guy like Kendrick Law from Kentucky, who they brought in for a visit. His superpower is yak ability. They're going to look for specific skill sets and specific traits that are like triumphant over everything in a guy's game to when they try and draft these guys too. So you can really kind of piece these down. It's not crazy. I don't think it's hard. Is the hit rate going to go down? It's not as obvious, right? We're not tracking pro days anymore, and we're not doing all these little minuscule things that Tomlin obviously did over the years. It's not a science like that, but there's all these indications over the map to where you can say, well, this is a guy that Mike McCarthy's going to like. This is a guy he's not going to like because you're too small or things like that. And so it's not that hard to kind of place kind of guys into these buckets.
Cool. No, hey, I want to pepper in a couple things from the comments. We had a comment sort of warning about Beck, like he's worried that the Steelers are too interested in Carson Beck, and he's wants us to wave off of that. And then another guy saying, hey, say the Steelers end up with Tyson in the first, trade up for Pregon in the second, and grab a good DT and a safety in the third. Are they Super Bowl material right there?
I have a hard time buying those Super Bowl material. I do. I think the quarterback position is going to be an undoing. I think that there's real concern about the left side of the O-line. Even if they get Pregnon, I love Pregnon, but left tackle, with Jones' injury and Cook, I think, there's promise, but still questions. And I do think there's still questions about the speed in the secondary. That is one thing I'm still pretty spooked about. There's not a lot of speed in that secondary, especially in the safety room. So you're going to have to kind of, it depends on the safety, right? You have to add speed there. But there's just a lot of guys on the back seven of that defense that are too up and down, right? And that, I think, when you have a lot of inconsistency across your team, it's hard to put together a manifested run to get to the Super Bowl because you have to stack, right? That's the big thing when you have to beat good teams and good teams and good teams. And it gets harder every single time because you're facing better and better teams throughout that run. And those inconsistencies from those players can be the exact weakness that you exploit, that you lose on. And so that, to me, I think it's going to be too much of a volatile team. I think it's going to be a high floor team, but I also think they're going to have variance week to week, just like last year, right? They were a good team last year. They were an undoubtedly playoff football team. They won the AFC North, but they also had this peak and valley where they would just show up one week and have a really good game. You know, the offense was clicking in Detroit, and then the next week they look like they're lifeless against the Browns, right? These things, I think, are the cycles of kind of this team and kind of how it's built. I think it can be a good team. I think it can be a better team than last year. And I think it can be a team that is working towards the right steps for maybe when you plop a quarterback in there, for example, in the 2027 draft. But Super Bowl material, I personally have a hard time buying that this year.
No, and it's well stated. The last time we talked, you were of the mind, though, that given the QB position, we're going to take a dart throw maybe in the middle of the rounds. Who do you think the target of that dart throw would be at quarterback? And is it a legitimate thing to draft a quarterback, even if you think, well, his ceiling is maybe a backup, a solid backup QB? Is that something that teams do? Hey, he's my future backup QB.
For sure, but I don't know if the Steelers need to do that. I mean, I've said it before. At the very least, Will Howard to me is high floor. I think he can be a backup for a very long time in the league, and so that's a good outcome for Will Howard. If he's anything more, it's gravy, right? So I don't want to draft for backup. Like Carson Beck does nothing for me. What am I drafting Carson Beck for? What is the developmental path here? What are we trying to get there? I get it, the experience. People love the experience, the tenuredness of him. But this guy's arm, man, he can't make tight window throws. I mean, you look at some of the throws he made outside the numbers last year, and I'll tell you what, John, they were quackers. Like they died. They died at the feet of some of these receivers, man. He can't push the ball out of the field. And listen, he had Tommy John surgery. Like that's a serious injury for a pitcher, but for a quarterback especially, you want to drive the football. That power did not show up on Carson Beck's tape. He's very smart above the neck. But why am I going for a low ceiling quarterback? I don't understand that. If you're going to take a dart throw quarterback, it's got to be a Drew Allen. It's got to be a Cole Pate. It's got to be a Taylor Green. It's got to be someone like that to me where you just have tools oozing. And everyone that understands, the quarterback play understands that tools only matter to an extent. You have to be really good above the neck. You have to have the mechanics. You have to have the accuracy. You have to have all of those. But you can at least take a dart throw on ceiling. That's where the Steelers should look. They should not look for floor in this class. That's not what they should be chasing. They should be chasing ceiling. And I do think, something that Mike McCarthy talked about that was a little concerning to me, or at least maybe perked my head up, was he said, sometimes when I'm evaluating quarterback prospects, I get excited by the floor. And I think that is a little bit, specifically for where the Steelers are, that's bad process. You got to take a shot on a high upside guy. And so to me, that's what I would do. I would take a shot on someone with upside rather than the high floor, because I don't think they need a guy with the high floor right now. They need a guy that can come in and can maybe wow with the traits, and maybe you can develop the rest of the game and try to make him a rounded prospect. So I'm fine with taking a shot on a low floor quarterback in this class.
Well stated. And so we take the dart throw, but make sure it's a guy with all the measurables and the upside. So that's what we're going to target. Hey, before we go, we're already over the half hour. There was a good question in the chat talking about the plans for the draft. Nick, I know you will be there. I will not be there. We're going to have a PennLive team there, a video team, and maybe another reporter. But just talk about some of the things, for me watching on TV and others who aren't going to wade through the traffic to get downtown. What should we be looking for the Pittsburgh touches as this draft production is coming into view now?
Yeah, well, I will say this. I think it's going to be phenomenal. From some of the things I've heard, the Point State Park part of that, I think it's going to be really cool. I think there's going to be a Steelers country thing over there. You're going to have like a whole entranceway of like terrible towels, and it's going to be crazy. You're going to understand, why Western Pennsylvania has so much rich football history. I think that'll be fun. There's obviously going to be a whole zone. From what I know, it's the stage is, if you're coming down West General Robinson, kind of from PNC Park towards Acrisure, it's going to be right there. You're going to have the whole stage, and then the whole side all the way around to the Cayman Science Center will be open. It's going to be phenomenal. I think, they're going to probably have things inside towards the field as well. I think it'll be fun. If you're a football fanatic, if you like the draft, it should be fun. I'll be down there a little bit. I have to be on the south side during the night because that's where all the stuff happens Steelers-wise. That's where I get my interviews. That's where I get all that stuff. So I'll be kind of gallivanting between both. So I'll be over there and down at the south side, depending. You can ride the Gateway Clipper over if that's what you want to do, from the Point to the North Shore to Station Square, all around. I think there's events that are not only happening downtown at the Point and on the North Shore, but in the Strip District. I think you're going to see some in Market Square downtown there specifically. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So it's going to be a big extravaganza, man. It's going to be crazy, though. I will warn people. I think the traffic's going to be a nightmare. I don't think that's going to be fun. I do think that getting around, you'd be much better putting on public transportation for that, because they have designated routes of the public transportation where you can avoid the traffic from that. If you could just get dropped off in downtown, you can walk to any of those spots. So, that's what I would recommend for people, but depends on where you're staying. But they have shuttles going to every suburb way, the north, the south, the west, the east. So you could take a shuttle in from any of those if you're staying out there, but it should be pretty fun. And if you guys see me around, you can always stop and say hi. I'm sure I see a lot of people when I go to road games that do that to me, and I just run into them, wherever I am. But feel free if you see me down there in Pittsburgh to say hi.
All right. And we'll be back next Tuesday to get some late breaking draft questions in and more on our plans for covering it. And Nick sort of battening down the hatches on the south side, which I think I would probably be happier over there. I'm claustrophobic. I have to be able to get to a toilet. That's my number one priority.
Yeah,
But
it's
anyway,
gonna
I
be
digress. What's that?
it's gonna be wild, John. Because as someone pointed out in the comments, it is totally possible that the Pittsburgh Penguins could be playing their home playoff games
Oh
during
my,
that stretch, which would be insane.
that's crazy.
Insane. It shuts down for one Penguin game that's sold out. What do you think the draft plus a playoff game will do? It's gonna be madness.
Oh wow. Well, hey, I can't wait to watch it unfold, even if it is a slow motion train wreck. We shall see. But until next Tuesday at 4, we'll have the chat open for all your questions. We'll get my mic fixed, and we'll be back here for your entertainment. So until then, go Steelers.